Computer. Hello and good evening. Welcome to our first video discussion for TEL 708, Module 1. Kelly, Sandra, and Melissa here to chat with you tonight about meetings. So we wanted to talk about 2 or 3 of the worst meetings that we've ever participated and to talk about what made them so terrible, and then also to talk about the best meetings in which we participated as well as what made them great. So I wrote down a couple of different thoughts going through the reading as far as the qualities. A lot of those qualities aligned, but I'm going to just describe one meeting, I think. This meeting was one that I had. It was an online meeting. So that's one kind of like observation that I have actually right off the bat, is that I think the last couple of years since the pandemic, some of us did shift to online meetings. And I think that actually, that perspective of like all meetings all the time kind of changed for some people. It definitely did for me. So I can say for the last 3 years, every interaction I have with any colleague is a meeting, essentially, for me, like, because that's what they all are, Zoom meetings, but which kind of has an interesting thing. So I put online meeting, but all my meetings are online. But it was a program manager's meeting. An assistant director was chastising us for not getting along, or laying a message that other assistant directors and the director were all disappointed in us. And the consequence was that we would now be doing training and reflections on conflict resolution. Sandra's smiling. I think I told her when this meeting happens because it really rocked me. Like, I've never in my life had a meeting like this. And I never, as an adult, felt so like humiliated and disrespected with a communication approach. So as far as the qualities, I will kind of describe the quality of that one, which I think particularly in the book, I'm not sure that this was addressed. And I think that's kind of also why I want to talk about it as a quality of a meeting, because I didn't see it in the reading. But in particular, I think online meetings also like underscore the need for this. If you are going to be talking about strong emotions, or you're going to be relaying a certain sort of content, I think it's really important to establish trust, security, an agreement, something up front that actually helps set that tone, helps soften the blow of something like that. And I do think it's very different perception when you are online versus face-to-face in those sorts of meetings. I think there's a lot of different dynamics that come up online that sometimes make those meetings a little bit harder. So as far as the rest of the qualities of other meetings, the other meeting that I put, like, there's one that I used to have that was like a recurring meeting that was weekly, forced attendance, presentation that was just a sit and get sort of a style, and a lot of the content was really just irrelevant to my job. And so that keyed on all those qualities of worst meetings. Other things for me was starting late, going too long, any person who is talking too much or talking in circles, lack of strong leadership and facilitation, lack of a good agenda, irrelevant agenda. So all of those things, again, the book talks about those. And did you all want to share your worst meetings first, and we go through the worst meetings, and then we all go through best meetings? Do you want to do it that way?
Yeah, that sounds great.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, cool.
You want to go, Sandra?
Sure. So meetings are my life. So, like, I do all kinds of, I'm in all kinds of meetings, and I lead a lot of meetings, and I take meeting, and I consider retreats like one of my specialties. Like, I really think, and I think it's because of this idea of it's a learning time, right? So, like, I was very blessed, and we'll talk about good meetings in a minute, but I reflected a lot today about, like, where did I learn the things that I feel like I that make an effective meeting, and why am I so critical about all of the meetings I'm in these days, because I don't think that they're good meetings. And it's because when I worked at Big Brothers Big Sisters of America, I just learned from so many amazing professionals on how to run good meetings, and a lot of it matches some of the checklist elements that we talked about. But let's talk about the bad one. So there's 2 that came to mind. One is just a standing cabinet meeting that I am invited to every 2 weeks, and it's sort of like, just, hey everyone, email so-and-so if you have something to put on the agenda. It's like right there, there's zero facilitation. And it's more like, let's just take up time. That first exercise in the book that talks about how to do the cost estimate of how much time you waste, we do that on my team. And I can't even begin to tell you, like, it drives me crazy to think of how many of us are around this table and how much are you paying us to not do the regular stuff, the leadership stuff we have to do. Well, we're sitting here, we're not making decisions, we're not being updated, we're just talking about stuff. And I find it very difficult when there's no line of sight to the end goal. Like I wrote some thoughts about, at the end of the day, how are we upholding this learning, this continuous improvement culture that's advancing the ultimate mission of teaching and learning? And it just drives me insane. So our cabinet meetings are just basically a report out. There's not, I mean, you can send those things to me in an email, number one. The second kind of meeting that I want to just talk about is this other kind of meeting where individual representatives from different universities. So this has nothing to do with the inside of the university. We belong to a consortium of 30 universities. And I belong to a smaller group of like 6 that were sort of like the leadership group. So we go to these meetings and it's obvious that we're there and they're going to try to give us work, which is okay, but we didn't sign up for all of this work. We signed up to be like the voice of the rest of the network, but they've got to sort of dole out some work. This facilitator is the absolute worst facilitator ever, and she's a nice person, right? She's got her doctorate, she's intelligent, but she cannot run a meeting. So there's like these painful silences where there's no question on the table, we're just literally staring and people are texting each other like, OMG, how long did this silence? I mean, there's a whole underground conversation and it's awful. And so every so often someone will say, okay, like, all right, Kelly, you go ahead, stick your neck out, say what you say. And then one of us goes out there and says like, how about we do this? And then all of a sudden it's your job. And it's not our role. So it's very frustrating. And we've accomplished nothing in a year and a half. And it's amazing to me the amount of time that we spend there. And it's because it's so overwhelming. It's too much work to do. And she has no ability to know how to dole it out and to make us feel like we're going to be able to accomplish anything. So we get nothing done. So I've got plenty of bad experiences to share. So that's it for me. So Melissa, you go next.
I do not want to be a part of that meeting.
Those-
You guys both touched on a lot of the things that I was going to say. I think, Kelly, to your point, depending on the type of meeting, the norms are so important. In my line of work, doing a lot of confidential discussions and meetings with students, there's a lot of power dynamics and who gets to know what. And sometimes the way people handle that, I find really off-putting, where there's just not a need to mention if somebody can't know something, like just don't share, right? So a lot of, I think power dynamics and norms are really important to setting a positive tone. I also think, efficiency, Sandra, to your point, like, I don't know if it's just me getting older and not being able to remember so many things or my brain going in a million different directions right now, but I'm like, get to the point, stay to the point. Like I have no room. I have no space for the personal tangents. And it's a really big pet peeve of me when the head of my school does this in our leadership meeting, spends the first 15 minutes talking about how busy she is. And I'm just like, we could have accomplished so much in this time. We're all busy, so let's move past that. But yeah, the roles, so important. An agenda, a clear purpose with action. That's what I've noticed. And this exercise has been so good for me because like all the meetings that I attend, and honestly, I'm sad to say, even like some of the ones that I run, I realize, wow, I really didn't put in actionable next steps. So it just becomes this sort of mush of discussion, and that's not good. Also, one more point for you, Kelly, the online. I think it is like, we all say we don't like to be, just talked at, but it also drives me crazy now that ever since COVID, now everything online has to be like breakout groups. And sometimes we have these breakout groups and I'm like, we have nothing to discuss. Like you're just doing that to try to make us stay awake. Like,
How about people, what about the cameras on and off? That's another big thing of mine. Like we don't get to be in a conference room and hide under the table or put a bag on our heads. You're in the meeting, you're in the meeting. And I hear faculty at the college level talk about like I go to meetings with deans or all like leadership, and nobody's on their camera. And I'm thinking to myself, how do we do this? I will tell my if I teach, I'll tell my students to please turn on. I don't care what you're wearing. I don't care if you've got a bun on your head or if you've got your PJs on. Please join us, because it's hard for me to know how to read the room. And with my team, it's just it's an expectation, but I've never had an issue. And then I get people asking like, oh, how do you do that? And I'm like, you just say it. Like, you can't come into the conference room and hide under the table. Like, that's not appropriate behavior. So why would you do it on Zoom? I don't,
Yeah.
I think that's really impacted the quality of online meetings, I think.
Yeah, I agree. And then there's that strange space too, where like when I was at ASU, it was like, oh, well, it's like you have to respect it's a respect thing. And I'm like, but to your point, like you when we were in a conference room, you didn't get to like not show up and not be there. And so, yeah, it's a weird thing, for sure. But we can move on to good meetings now, if you want to move on to like our good meetings. I relate to you, Sandra, a lot. The first thing that I wrote, like as my notes to myself, was that I've actually had more good meetings than I have had bad meetings. And like you shared, I have had some phenomenal examples set for me from very organized people. And the organization I'm in right now, actually, their meetings we run very, very well. There's always those weird little things, those qualities about meetings that, still derail things. But in terms of, I definitely related to the checklist of preparation and, strong leadership, strong facilitation. One of the advantages, I think, possibly of online meetings that maybe I didn't like, if I think way back to my teacher days when I was at a staff meeting, like you show up and there's someone there and you're physical. And I don't know if you usually have paper or sometimes they have paper, but for my online meetings, all of them have a very clear agenda in a Google Doc that has been shared ahead of time. We have pre-work, we have roles, we have action items and next steps. As far as checklists, that's where my action items go. I have checklists because I do that whole like running meetings and copy and pasting meeting notes over. So like all of those strategies that I think online and digital tools have actually fostered that has really made, I think, like a lot of the meetings that I've gone to strong, run well, run very efficient. Again, knowing what you're going in there for, being prepared before you get in there and getting things done. The best meeting that I wanted to share though, which is again gonna like break from the norm of the book that is like these sort of like faculty in-person meeting sort of style, was what I was getting from reading the book. It ties to that idea of what I talked about, worst meetings. So community agreements is something that when we were in our COP and TEL, what is it? 702. Okay, good. 702. So last semester, TEL 702, dynamic context of education, we had a community of practice, we had our COP, and our first exercise with that was to do community agreements. And at first I was like, okay, this is interesting. Well, joining my organization where I work now, Digital Promise, I came in and the team's already there. They're in the like end part of establishing like a big chunk of community agreements. And that is like a norm setting activity that is ongoing work. We do it in Miro boards because it's a big like piece of work. But those community agreements that we have, I was able to reference those in that TEL 702 class and share those with my COP, and that helped guide us. And one of those was, there's several of them, but like accept and expect non-closure was one of them. Something also, I don't remember what it's called, but it's like being honest. Like, like you need to be present, but also like if there's a reason that you're not present, you need to be honest. And so like that's a community agreement we have that's established that I was able to understand well enough that a meeting that I went into last week, I had multiple deadlines for my first blog post for like 2 different like stakeholders, and sort of stressing out, trying to figure things out. And I was going into a meeting with a smaller colleague group. There was pre-work that I had done a little bit of it, but probably not enough. And I got into the meeting and I shared, I'm going to share with you all right now. And one of our team members wasn't able to be there. I was like, I apologize. I have not done like my due diligence with the pre-work. I've done some of it, but like I am not present in this meeting right now because I have some like deadlines for things and I have questions I don't know how to answer because I'm still like fairly new at 5 months. And they were like, let's work on your issues. Like this is work we can like do later. Let's do this. And so it doesn't follow the checklist. It doesn't, like, we didn't have that as an agenda and objective set, but having that community agreement and having that ability to like communicate with my colleagues and for them to be like, this is okay. And so they helped me out. We worked on that. We did some stuff. At the end, the little last chunk that we had, we did circle back to our agenda and did a real quick, like, okay, so like, this is what we were going to do. We're going to work on this at this time and this time. And then I made a commitment to them. Hey, I promise you after this deadline is passed for this, I am going to dig back into this. So again, for me, that was a really good meeting. And it was one of those like outside of the box, doesn't necessarily follow the checklist. If I had to describe 2 or 3, the other great meetings I've had have been typically pitches that I do to stakeholders. And it's because it meets all the criteria that they talk about. Like it starts on time. I have a very clear agenda. I've done like homework, pre-work. I've given the pre-work to the people that need it. There's very clear objectives that are set. There's a note taker. There's a facilitator. The facilitator, we don't always have a timekeeper. I will admit that typically I lead meetings as a facilitator, and I have done that role of both facilitate and timekeep because I have to pass things off to different people. But the action items, like, yes, all of those things I think are really important. And the strong facilitation and leadership is also really helpful for those people that do talk in circles and tend to get your meeting off rails, because if you have a good facilitator, communicator, they're able to sort of like allow the space and the freedom, but then also rein it in and like put it back on track sometimes, is what I've found with like some of the best meetings that I've like been in. Yeah, so that's pretty much what I've got.
So I'll go real quick because I know we've got to jump. The meetings that I really enjoyed were the meetings, like I said, with Big Brothers Big Sisters of America, where I used to work, and whether they were weekend, like 2 to 3 day meetings, or whether they were 2-hour meetings, they were structured the same, and they really went along the lines of making sure that there was clear purpose, that there was process. One of the notes that I made for myself was that there was an agenda that had diversity. Like there were sometimes chunks of the agenda where there was like an update, or we were being asked for input, or we were going to do work. Like, so you were never bored. It wasn't just like sitting there. Like you always knew that there was going to be a lot of movement. And again, that could happen in a 2-hour meeting, that could happen in a 2-day meeting. Strategic placement in the big picture. I really appreciate this, probably because it's like one of my like Clifton strengths is like the strategic talent theme, which is I need to know why are we talking about this and how it relates to the big picture. And I think that speaks to the Data Wise book where the authors say, you know, how does this meeting, how does its purpose inevitably, you know, or ultimately advance the work of delivering continuous improvement towards the ultimate mission of teaching and learning? So like at the end of the day, we're talking about this little piece of the pie because this piece of the pie is important to the whole thing. And just knowing that sort of keeps us grounded. They did a really good job with that. Their facilitation, I learned from some of the best. I feel like they, you know, always starting with like, where are we? Like, where's your head? And you were allowed to say like, well, I got to say, like, I just dropped my son off at college and I'm a little wistful, but I'm here, I'm good. But thank you for asking. And just that moment of humanity, the beginning of the meeting, doesn't have to take, like your point is, doesn't have to take 20 minutes, but it's so well appreciated that people can just sort of be. And if you see me glaze over, if you see me get up and have me go outside, you know why. And then I also have a lot more respect for the group because I'm going to give you the best that I've got. So just recognizing where we are. And then intentional structure. So like, you know, I think a good meeting requires time to plan it. You know, like I spend as much time planning a meeting as I do being in the meeting, probably more time.
Agreed.
Like right now, instead of doing I usually do a full day retreat for my staff in the summer to plan for the year, as opposed to doing like the usual 7 to 8 hours. I decided this summer to break it up and do 3 half days, one in May, one in June, one in July. We're a big team, so I don't always bring them together because I've got 4 smaller teams in there. But they like it. And then I have a spreadsheet and I've been building it over the last 6 weeks. I'm like, when are we going to work on this project and this project? It's a lot of mapping. Like, I think a good meeting requires as much time preparing for it as you are in it in order for it to have the purpose and the action that you were talking about, Melissa. So anyways, those are things that I learned along the way.
I think that one of the reasons you have such success, Sandra, is because you are really good at keeping that humanity in conversations, right? As a leader, you're striking that balance of being efficient and organized, but also giving people room to be human. And I think that's a difficult balance to strike. I feel like some of the best meetings I've had, that balance has been struck, sometimes through really simple things like having snacks and checking in.
Absolutely.
Having laughter, moments where we can just be like self-deprecating and open and vulnerable. It's like really that psychological safety, right? To feel like, okay, if we're going to collaborate and we're really going to take this risk and like work together, I have to feel safe enough to be able to open up, because I've been in some meetings where it's like super efficient, but it feels so tight. And you're just like, I don't feel comfortable. Like, I feel like somebody's going to be like, well, we don't have time for that, So that balance is really important. I've had that in some of I was a high school counselor for a while, and we had a really strong student services team where we had great meetings where we would just like talk about students and really get in there and sort of problem solve how to effectively and collaboratively support them better. Another thing that I think is really important, and this actually relates, Kelly, what you were saying, we did this in our COP last semester too. We had an agreement that we didn't talk about the dynamics of the meeting outside of the meeting. So there were no side conversations like, can you believe this happened, or that's annoying, or blah, blah, blah. Because I really think that, again, contributes to that sense that you're like, okay, we're all committing to this. And if there's an issue, we'll address it as a group. And yeah, just like I talked about before, like some of the one last meeting that I had that was amazing was actually our entire school, which is pre-K through 12. So the president of the school facilitating the entire thing and doing like such an excellent job of negotiating all those things and still somehow keeping us engaged and like feeling connected, even as this huge group breaking out into different sessions with like clear agenda items coming back, and then having like instant accountability, having to use that for the next step to like really keep people engaged.
It's a great learning experience. Like it's like what the book says, right? Like it's a good learning experience. You feel jazzed, like
yeah, inspired, exactly.
And like you feel like your time was utilized well,
Mm-hmm.
I think that's really it's so nice to be able to say that we've all experienced those. So there's like hope.
Yeah, definitely.
Awesome.
Awesome. Great. Well, thanks for listening to us, and we will see you all next week. Hope you have a wonderful rest of your week. Talk to you later. Bye.
Bye.